We are now in the book of Esther. What do we know about Esther? What do you remember about
Mordecai's
Esther?
niece.
Married Xerxes.
Yeah.
Xerxes the first is king in Persia, right? In Babylon. This takes place in their winter capital in Susa. Right? Time frame, anybody know when this takes place? When is-
22 BC.
Yeah, later.
Later than that, 800?
No, later, not earlier.
Earlier.
460 BC. 460.
That's approximate, because Xerxes is king from 486 to 464. So it's slightly before 460, but, somewhere in that time frame, near as we can tell. Okay? Our focal lesson is in chapter 3, but it starts out in 3:1 with after these events. So we need to kind of know what these events are, don't we?
That'd be interesting.
Real quick. Xerxes, or Ahasuerus,
Oh, yeah.
is the king, right? And it's, again, we read this before, who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. Remember that when we were studying?
Can you imagine trying to do that without a phone?
For a fax machine.
Yeah.
Much less a
I
computer.
don't know how they do that. I mean, fast horse?
Well, the
They would
messages were
have
sent
messengers.
a lot of times with traders.
They'd
but
have governors.
They had governors over the
Break it down
provinces,
into-
right?
Provinces.
Now Xerxes is the son of Darius the first, right? And he had this big old party in their winter capital in Susa. And so everybody had been pretty much partying for about 6 months. Okay? And he decides one day that he's calling his wife in to show her off because she was so pretty. And she said, I ain't going in there.
He probably wanted her to do it nude, right?
Well, there's no implication of that, but he certainly wanted to show off her beauty, and whatever it was, she felt like it was degrading, right? And she wasn't going to do it. So Vashti, right, refused to go in, and the advisors told him, you know what? If you let her get away with that, you realize how much trouble we're going to have with our wives?
That's right.
So he puts her aside, and they set out on a campaign to find the most beautiful woman in all the kingdom to be the new queen. So they round up, we don't know how many hundreds of young ladies, young virgins, right, and bring them to Susa, okay, in this search for the new queen. And by the way, on a side note, do you know what's missing in the book of Esther?
There's no mention of God.
No mention of God whatsoever.
In fact, another thing, it was one of the last two books of the Bible that came under canon law. And in part, most of it was because of that, because there was no mention. Anyway.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that's, anybody know what a skip letter sequence is?
Kind of.
The so-called Bible code?
Go over so many and pick a letter, go over so many, pick a letter.
Well, the same number. So it's like if it's
Yeah.
every 13 or every 39 or whatever, right? And see what it spells out. Well, in the skip letter sequence in here, it spells Yahweh, Messiah, El Shaddai, So the Lord's name is in it in that form.
Right.
Right? Of course, they wouldn't have known that back when they were canonizing. Right, so now we're looking for a queen, and in chapter 2, verse 5, there was a Jew in Susa, the capital, the winter capital, whose name was Mordecai. Okay? the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjaminite. Who else is from the family of Kish, a Benjaminite?
Which, well, Paul's Benjamin
Yeah,
from the, is that what you're asking?
David's-
No, okay.
Can't think of his name, but
the predecessor,
yeah,
Saul.
Saul.
That's correct. Saul was also from the family of Kish, a Benjaminite. And what was Saul told by God to do that he failed to do completely? He was told to go down and wipe out the Amalekites. Remember, the Amalekites were a real thorn in the side to all the Jews as they were in the desert. And they kept, attacking and whatnot, and they're a real problem. And the Lord said, all right, it's time for payback now. And he sent Saul to go wipe them out. And Saul did not do it. He even brought back the king. You remember the king, Agag? And Samuel killed the king because Saul didn't do it. Right? Keep that in mind. Okay? Now also, remember he's a son of Shimei, right? If you remember another story, Shimei survived because David did not kill him. So anyway, the story here is we're looking for the queen. We find this guy, Mordecai, okay, who'd been taken into exile. Most of the Jews at this point, you remember 50,000 Jews had gone back around 538. Mm-hmm. Now we're in the 470s, 460s, whatever, because lots and lots and lots of Jews chose to stay.
Right.
It wasn't like they were like when they were in Egypt and they were slaves. These people had assimilated into society and they owned property and businesses and da-da-da-da-da, right? And so when it was time to go home, these people were born there. This was home. They didn't see Jerusalem as home, so they didn't go back. But he's bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, right? The cousin, for she had neither father nor mother. The young lady was beautiful of form and face, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her in as his own daughter. Right? So he's like her legal guardian. So the events that are happening prior to this, the party, Vashti being set aside, searching for the new queen, right? And we find out that Esther is selected. Now, Mordecai had told her, don't say anything about being a Jew. So she didn't. Okay? And the Lord gave her, blessed her, and etc. The other women came in. They prepared for a year. They went and spent a night with the king. And then he put them in the harem. One after another. We don't know how many, but probably in the hundreds. Along comes Esther, and he's like, you're the one. So instead of being one of many in a harem, she becomes the queen, which also had fairly significant power. Vashti was having her own parties too and doing stuff, while she was queen. Okay? Now down in verse 21, in those days while Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, anybody remember the significance of the gate?
Well, that's where all the business was transacted.
Yeah. It was the hangout place, but it was also where business was done, politics, things all happened. There's a big old open area there right inside the gate, and this is where all this stuff took place, We have many references in the Bible to things happening, quote, at the gate, right? So, Mordecai sitting there implies that he is some sort of government official himself. Then Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's officials from those who guarded the door, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. Right? But the plot became known to Mordecai, and he told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And now when the plot was investigated to be, found to be so, they were both hanged on a gallows, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the king's presence. The king did have a practice of recording these things. Okay? So, this is something else that happened, quote, and now after these things. This is one of those things that has happened that shows up later in the story. Okay? So back to chapter 3 now. After all this thing is going on, because this search for a queen was like a 4-year deal. Okay? And now we're about 5 years into Esther being queen, actually. Okay? And so after these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman. We don't know why. But I suspect it had something to do with Haman's deceptions. That he had tricked the king into getting promoted. Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite. The Agagite. Remember the king Agag that was not killed? And advanced him and established his authority over all the princes who were with him. This guy is a descendant of the Amalekites, and apparently a descendant of the kingship. Agag in the Amalekite is kind of like Pharaoh. It means king, because they use the name. We'd say Agag, but apparently it's pronounced Agag, according to the commentaries, right? But since that name is used over and over, they're assuming it actually is just a symbol for whoever's the king of the Amalekites. Like Pharaoh means the king of the Egyptians and whatnot, okay? So he's a descendant of that. He is not a friend to the Jews, is he? Now all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, so that the king had commanded concerning him, but Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage. Now, we don't know for a fact that this bowing was a type of worship, but apparently Mordecai certainly felt like it was. Because we know the reason why he did not bow down is because he was a Jew. He tells us that here in just a little bit. But he's not bowing. Now, when you're inside a situation such as the Jews were, being in the Babylonian government, they were in that society, and there's things, there are things that you can accommodate, but then there are things you cannot. Mordecai saw this as something that he simply could not do, as Daniel did, right? Mm-hmm. He said, you can't pray to any other God. He said, oh, yes, I can. Right? There's no way I'm stopping my prayers. Mordecai said, I'm not bowing down to that dude. Now, we don't know that Mordecai knew about Haman's ancestry. We just know he was not going to bow. In the American society today, are there things going on that we can accommodate, and are there things going on where we got to put our foot down? See, I'm not doing that.
Yes.
Whether the rest of you do or not, I'm not doing that. Our society obviously has drifted far away from God as a global society.
Yeah.
And when you look at the divorce rate amongst Southern Baptists being the same percentage as it is in regular society, that you just gotta say to yourself, what?
Yep.
You know, all those sort of things. So the question becomes, personally for us, is when is God telling us, put your foot down right here? You cannot go along with this. For me, it's voting for Mitt Romney, a Mormon, a Satanist, right? A high priest in the Church of Satan called Mormonism. I couldn't vote for him. I couldn't vote for Obama either. Voted for everybody else on the presidential election. I just had to leave it off. I could not vote for a Mormon. And legitimize, you know, the concept of Mormonism, and potentially, if he's elected president, we might send 1 million people to hell. We don't know. But that was one I talked to God about. I said, I'm not comfortable with this. He said, you shouldn't be. Okay? But there are things that we just have to say. And I'm not saying they're the same for everybody, but there are probably a whole bunch of similarities, right? You know,
I think so,
where
yeah.
God's just going to say, no. There might be things when you're at work, you know, it's going on that you can, you know, bite your tongue. And then there are times when you have to speak up. You know, I got a kick out of Thursday night, and this would be a praise report at Lynn's office Christmas party. Unlike the last 3 years where it's been a holiday party, the head guy in the office got up at the beginning of the deal and said, welcome to our Christmas party. And he gave a
Good for
prayer
him.
that was basically a sermon.
Well, what is the company that she works for?
First Capital Corporation. You know, they loan money to businesses. You know, they're an AR factoring business for the most part. There's a lot of trucking companies on, you know, that you cut an invoice to a customer and immediately fax it to them. They pay you a discounted rate for the invoice, and the end customer pays them. You know, so you get your money faster, you know, at a discount, kind of thing. That's what they do, and they do a lot of it. They literally have almost $1 billion on the street. You know. But when they got bought by that outfit in Florida, boy, all of a sudden, you know, it was a holiday party. But this year it wasn't.
Did somebody else buy them?
No.
He just
No.
took this upon himself?
Well, there were none of the Florida people there, so I think he just took it upon himself to do it. He's a Christian, right? And afterwards I talked to him about it, and he says, I hope I didn't offend anybody. I said, heck, even the wait staff was cheering you on. You know, so anyway, Mordecai said, I'm not doing it, right? Now, maybe he knew about that Haman was an Amalekite. I don't know, but nonetheless, he said, this ain't happening. In verse 3, then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, why are you transgressing the king's command? And it was when they had spoken daily to him. They kept asking him this over and over. Are you going to get us all in trouble here? You think they were concerned about Mordecai? They were concerned about themselves, weren't they? Yeah, you're going to get us in trouble if you don't do what the king has said. He would not listen to them and they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's reason would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. So they went to went to Haman and said, Mordecai over here is not bowing. He's not bowing because he is a Jew. Is that okay? They're trying to figure out when it's okay for them not to bow. Right? And of course Haman, who knows his ancestry, and finds out that Mordecai is a Jew, right, and is not bowing, he becomes quite upset. Because he's filled with pride, isn't he? When Haman saw that Mordecai neither bowed nor paid homage to him, Haman was filled with rage. But he disdained to lay his hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him who the people of Mordecai were, therefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews.
Mhm.
What kind of a person does it take to feel like you've been affronted by one person and decide, I'm not just going to kill him, I'm going to kill every single one? Somebody led by Satan. How many times has Satan led people to try to destroy the Jews? Throughout history,
Throughout history,
right? You know, because prior to,
pretty much from day, at the beginning.
you know, I mean, of course, Germany tried it, you know, but it's been going on, you know, from the beginning of time, basically, that Satan has tried to get people to do his bidding, because he certainly didn't want the Messiah to come, right? And that was his number one reason. If I can eliminate all the Jews, since he has to come through,
And there will be none.
there won't be one, right? You know, so he kept trying to do that. So he wanted to kill all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, right? This could have been 2-3 million people at this point,
Oh, yeah.
right? Now, in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, that is the lot, was cast for Haman from day to day and from month to month until the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. He is practicing divination. He's asking his gods, when is the right time for me to approach the king with my plot to kill all the Jews? And he finally tells him, here it is in the 12th month, this is the right time. So, Esther's now been queen for 5 years. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people, scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of all other people, and they do not observe the king's laws. So it is not in the king's interest to let them remain. So he goes in with these half-truths, does not inform the king who they are, right? So this group is unidentified. That's why I think Haman probably got his position by being deceitful to the king. And now he's trying to get his will here by being deceitful to the king. And then flattering the king, you know, if it is pleasing to the king, you know, let it be decreed that they be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver. That's about 375 tons, or half of the annual revenue to the Persian government. How did he get all that money?
Serious.
I don't think he had it. But when you get into the rest of the plot, you know, the people who killed the Jews were going to get to take all their stuff. And I think he was planning on a percentage of all of that. And that's how he was going to come up with this money to pay into the king's coffers, right? You know, silver into the hands of those who carry on the king's business to put into the king's treasuries, right? So he is providing this quite deceitful plan against this, quote, unidentified group that we know are the Jews, Mordecai's people, that he hates and his ancestors have hated, you know, because they are, you know, followers of Satan, and followers of Satan don't care for followers of God. And so he's laid out the plan. And we know that the king says, okay. He even tells Haman to keep his silver. That was a little bit
He
surprising.
must have a whole lot of money if he can just pass that off.
Well, he's the king. He could always raise taxes anytime he wanted to. He didn't even have to go to Congress.
Yeah.
Like our king.
Yeah.
That's familiar.
Yeah, kind of like our king. You know? I was thinking it, Jack. I just didn't say it. Right? So next week we'll move on into the rest of the story of how the outcome comes, where God is working behind the scenes, even when we don't realize it. God knew Esther needed to be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
He put this all in place to save his people, like he's done over and over and over. And how many times has he saved your behind without you realizing it?
Well, obviously more than I can realize. I bet.
Right?
I'm just amazed to protect him as much as he has.
I know it. You start looking from going back to the time you was a kid forward, and it's like,
Well,
man,
then the question is, if he's done that for you, what is it he wants you to do now?
with the rest of my life,
Mhm.
oh, express to the world what he has done for me.
That's one of the things.
Mhm.
You know,
Go make disciples.
there might be something very specific coming up.
Probably not with a lot of money.
That would mean total obedience, though. So,
That would mean.
That would mean obedience.
Oh,
Yeah.
Max, did you want to talk about your deal today? You want to wait till next week when we get into the?
No, I realize that the one that I'll share in the next chapter.
Yeah. Okay. Right. All right. Any other comments or questions about Esther getting to this point? All right. Well, let's pray.